Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to your Daily Penguin. This is our tour through my Penguin Classic wall, book by book, author by author, period by period, and we have hit large patches of disorganization. We started out fairly well. A yen to organize part of this wall must have occurred to me years ago. So we started out with the ancient world, but that hasn't stayed true. And today is a perfect example where, actually, the last couple of weeks have been good examples. We're just bouncing all over creation. And today is an example that gets to me. I'm glad to find it on my Penguin Classic wall, but I admit, forgotten it was there, mainly because I think it's all by itself, and when it should have 25 or 30 compatriots with it. This is a novel by Iris Murdoch, who wrote a great many novels and was also a formal philosopher. And this is The Black Prince, which the Penguin paperback describes as a literary thriller, an intellectual literary thriller. The main character is a retiring civil servant who is also the author of a string of intellectually reputable but ignored novels. And his rival, sort of rival, an odious literary figure who writes golden bestsellers, apparently with ease, and the women in their various orbits. And as such, it should appeal to me. Absolutely, it should appeal to me. It's a book set in the literary world of authors and publishers and critics. It ought to appeal to me. And yet, the one time that I read this book was not in a Penguin Classic. This Penguin Classic is edited by Martha Nussbaum. And the one time that I read this book, when it first came out, it bored me, as have almost all of Iris Murdoch's books, even her recognized classic, The Sea. These books have always struck me as torturously overwritten. And I couldn't get around that for what little plot there was. Iris Murdoch has always struck me as the type of English novelist who cares about plot structure only as a very secondary concern and is mostly interested in manner. And again, that should appeal to me. Even though I love plot, that should appeal to me. Iris Murdoch has been at the top near the top of a list of authors I need to revisit in toto for quite some time. And finding this copy, this Penguin Classic of The Black Prince, if there are other Penguin Classics of Iris Murdoch, I don't have them. I have no other Iris Murdoch in any format. None of the cheesy mass markets, none of the old trade paperbacks, no other Penguin Classics, no hardcovers. I don't have any of this author's work. And I think it's high time that I did, that I re-examined everything about this author. She has some passionate fans. Her fiction, her novels, have some passionate fans. And among those passionate fans, for decades, have been people whose opinions I can't ignore. Where if they say this is an unbelievably successful string of novels, I can't just say, well, you ought to get out more, because they know what they're talking about. So I examined this book with a little bit of a guilty conscience, because I feel like I have not done right by this author. It's quite a few authors, as you know, if you've been watching this parade of the Penguins. There are quite a few authors that I feel that way about, but Iris Murdoch is right at the top of that list. And I wanted to read you just one paragraph from The Black Prince that I picked at random and that underscores what I'm saying. No need to know who the characters are here. Just pay attention to the ambiance, if you would. Rachel was wearing a light green, rather military-looking mackintosh. She had her hands in her pockets, and her face, directed at me, communicating privately, blazed with a sort of euphoric purpose. The immediate eye-to-eye communication showed me how far we had moved ever since our last meeting. One does not usually look deep into other people's eyes. There was a pleasant shock. Julian was wearing a tawny corduroy jacket and trousers and a brown and gold Indian scarf. She looked raffish, but had put on the self-consciously humble young person's expression, the kind of expression which says, I know I'm the youngest person and very inexperienced and unimportant, but I shall do my best to be helpful, and it is very kind of you to pay any attention to me at all. This attitude is, of course, a special kind of vanity. The young are self-satisfied, really, and utterly ruthless. That is wonderful. And I've read everything by Iris Murdoch, so I don't need to trouble my memory much to realize that passages like that run all throughout all of her novels. So why they haven't gelled for me as reading experiences, I don't know. the fact that the author can be rhetorically fussy can, in my opinion, drown out the meal by rearranging the salt shakers, shouldn't be prohibitive. There are other authors I love who do the same thing, Anthony Burgess being foremost among them. Letting style get in the way of substance is pretty much the sole description of his career. And yet I love him. So I have The Black Prince to revisit and all the rest of Iris Murdoch to revisit. So this is a good reminder. Not sure it's enough of a reminder to keep this volume. Especially if Penguin only makes a handful. If there's only a handful of Penguin Classic Black Spine paperbacks of Iris Murdoch novels, then I don't know that I need to keep this one, because I will want the whole of her books. I'll just have to figure that out. I'll figure out how to do it. But this is a kick in the keister to remind me that on the list of authors I need to pay attention to, this author is right up there. So The Black Prince, as far as your Penguin recommend goes, it's difficult for me to do. I would be going off my one reading of this book, which was decades ago. This came out, I think, in 1973. I think I read it not long after that. And I haven't read it since. I never revisit Iris Murdoch. The one time I did that, I revisited The Sea, and A Fairly Honorable Defeat. And in both cases came away with my opinions unchallenged, my previous opinions unchallenged. That's always tricky. That always makes me suspicious. So, you know, in terms of what this novel does, this is ordinarily where I would tell you either that I recommend it or that I don't. And several of you have pointed out that really, ideally, all of the penguins on that wall should be recommends. But in this case, I'm going to have to plead. I'm going to have to throw myself on the mercy of the court. I don't know precisely what I think about this author. Certainly not enough to recommend. I would suggest take your recommendations from someone who knows her novels and can talk about them. I need to know them better. So that's the pile this book is going in. So that is your Daily Penguin, is Iris Murdoch, of all people. And we will go on tomorrow. We'll see who we encounter then. It could be anybody at this point. I'll wrap this up for now, and I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.